No, not for recording, but not questions. We're stopping any questions. You ready? Okay, I'm good to go, I think. Hi, everybody. I hate microphones. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. Does it work? We're good, Cody? Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm pleased to welcome Ryan Kitson to campus, ceramic sculptor. He's had a busy day today meeting with students, and he also juried our all-campus juried student exhibition. He picked some really great work. So we're pleased to have him here. Ryan was born in Mountain View, California in 1977. He attended Southern Oregon University in the late 90s before moving to New York City to pursue a career in the fine arts. He holds a master's degree in visual culture from the Pacific Northwest College of Art and has exhibited in New York, LA, Berlin, Vienna, Milan, Portland, San Francisco, and Marfa, Texas. He currently resides in Baker City, and we're really pleased to have him here. Welcome, Ryan Kitson to EOU.
How's it working now? Is that better? Okay. Did you hear that I was thanking Susan and Corey and Nathan? All right. Yeah, thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. So what I'm going to do tonight is just kind of give you a relatively superficial overview of the work I've been doing since I was in your position in college. I'm not going to show you a bunch of undergrad work, but I'll start with that. And then kind of, go through the slides. Some will go fast, some will go slower if I want to mention a certain thing or remember something about the process. And then we'll do a Q&A after that. So hope you enjoy it. We'll see. So I'll start with this work because it's where you guys were, but this is back in 2000. It's The Simpsons. It's a sculpture. I asked my advisor if I could take a year to make a work, if I could take an entire year to make a work, because usually it's kind of divided up by semesters, and you're running a pretty scheduled, like, 3 months. What can I do? And I guess 10 weeks in Oregon. And he was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And you can see, so it took me a year to make it, and it was all set up for a photograph of I got a 4x5 camera and took it's called Family Portrait. And it is clay. It's not ceramic. I just sprayed just green clay with ammonia-based latex, and then bought like a sheep's wool, like a dyed, made the hair and whatever, and then sculpted the frame. It's about 50 inches high. It sits off the wall. It's a thick frame. But that was the last thing I did in undergrad, and then I, packed up my bags and went to the East Coast. And it was right after 9/11, so I walk into New York City with this kind of comical artwork, and it just didn't match at all. I was just I couldn't even, the vibe had shifted, let's say. And I have this stupid Simpsons portrait. But, that happens. You can't really help when things like that occur. So this was the first piece I did. It took a year or two to kind of establish a studio and everything. And this is called Hanging Blue Balloon. And it's all resin. The faucet is painted to look like it's a brass or a bronze faucet. But it's all one piece in one mold. And the transparency is because of it's not a balloon around water. It's just solid resin were inverted. And again, it still kind of has this kind of, it was like one of a very primordial memory of mine is filling up a water balloon at a faucet as a kid. This is just called Six Pack. I got a job making molds and sculpting toys for brands like Dora and SpongeBob and stuff, and so I learned how to make molds. So you kind of let your work, you kind of go with the flow and let what you're doing influence how you work. And so I was like, oh, I can make a detailed mold, so I'll take a 6-pack of beer and I'll smash it all the same way, so it kind of has this illusion of standing up, but it's sitting down. And I was new to an urban environment. I always lived out west, and so small things were kind of intriguing to me. This one's called Wishing Well. It's just resin inside a trash can lid with like one of those car scent things, some leaves, some change. This is called Tusk, and it's just a solid, so I made a cast of my arm holding a chisel, and then kind of like from there sculpted another elbow. You can see, it's hard to tell. This is like, it's odd because it's like a second elbow and then another bicep thing. And then I sculpted this elephant tusk, and then got a guy who actually fabricated stands for elephant tusks to make me this little stand, and bought this kind of nondescript yet kind of corny 90s credenza for the pedestal. This is just called Mono Balloon, and it's just cast resin painted. This is called Two Balloons, and it's 2 resin balloons with a rubber band. It's funny because, like kind of collecting my thoughts and sorting through old slides. Like this is from 2000 and, I don't know, 7 or something. And it's kind of like when you're doing your taxes and you're looking at receipts over the year, and you're like, oh, I remember going to dinner that night. So I was thinking like what was going on, and it's interesting, when you work, maybe not necessarily abstractly, but not literally or not in a narrative fashion, your subject matter just is there, and I was like, oh, I remember this is like the first time I moved in with a girlfriend. And I didn't know that at the time that that's what I was making work about. But then, 20 years later, I was like, oh, duh, that's that situation. So you don't need to worry. You don't force content into your work, I guess is the lesson. It'll be there, especially when in hindsight, it's just so obvious. And this is when we really moved in together. This is the first shared apartment situation. This is called, I think it's called Love Loop or Love Lock, or not Love Lock. But it's fabricated. It's not found kryptonite locks. Do they still use kryptonite locks for bikes? Is this a familiar object? So this is kind of the lock you had to have. And but there was a soapstone sculpture at a African tourist knick-knack stand in Union Square, and it's a pretty common sculpture called it's made out of stone, soapstone. It's called like a love knot or something. And I was like, God, that kind of looks like 2 kryptonite locks, but it was little. And so I figured I could, make a jig and get some steel and bend it, and then, cover and it was an odd sculpture because these things, it's hard to tell unless you're walking around it. They just look like they're floating. They're connected, but you never really see the connection. So it's kind of this interesting little, kitschy sculpture that I just translated through a more recognizable contemporary object. And so it's steel with I even put a little keyhole thing. It doesn't work, but the details matter. You know, it's not like you're trying to show off that you can fabricate something. It's like if the details aren't there, then it's a distraction. You know, so you have to remember that you're not like being a nerd necessarily. You're pursuing, and depending on the work, obviously, but don't be afraid to like be really crazy about something for an effective end, which is, you know, not being a distraction. I don't remember what this was called. I'll think of it. It's just, so I cast my friend's feet. Oh, I think it's called J-Lo. Or there was this really cheap mannequin that was all over the city that was just like, all of a sudden it was okay to just have like butt mannequins everywhere. And maybe you remember, I don't know, but it was a very common mannequin. And it was cut off right here with a solid top. You could also buy like a full body version. I mean, there wasn't arms. So I like the idea of this kind of abject, just piece of styrofoam, the classic 5-gallon bucket, as this reference to, like, you know, a column or something like that, or like a classical pedestal. And so I cast my friend Jenna's feet. I got some stretched jeans. I took the mannequin, cut it off so it's hollow in there. And then I had her kind of just tiptoe on this pedestal. So it was my first, I guess, figurative sculpture out of school. And then I thought it was funny that you could easily exaggerate this by just getting little teeny tiny pockets and putting them like on the outside. And this is like the dude version of my figure sculpture. This is just an enlarged parrot toy. I don't know if you've been in a Petco or whatever, but there's just like these, it's kind of a figure. This is just a photograph. I think this was called No Brain, No Headache. I don't remember. This was an edition I did for this kind of like fundraising thing. You can't see it really. There's a red line. This is steel and this is hydrocal with pigment on it. I made this when I turned 30. I remember that. You know those like little collapsible things you hit the bottom and it falls? So it's like, I made it actually, I was talking to someone about this today, about making work. It's always implied that we're like making work for an audience or a gallery or, you know, our career or whatever, but I made this work, no, I made it when my brother turned 30 because I wanted to give him a little grief. He's my younger brother. And so it was a gift for him. Like, here you go, old man. This is like, you know, the classic tennis ball and the walker and the cane. It's kind of this slapstick thing. But it's also kind of like a portrait. It hangs on the wall. This one is called Ball Plank Wall, I think. I have a detail I can't find. You can kind of see it there maybe. It does have, it's like those, you know, those dollar store kind of pearlized balls with that one little needle insert. And then this plank, some I did with like steamed solid pieces of wood and bent them. And then some this was like laminated, like, you know, thin sheets of wood to make like a normal looking, just a random like 1x3. Pressing this, you know, keeping the ball against the wall. And I made a few of them. This is one that was treated. You can see the little insert thing here better. This one's called, I think, floor plank ball. I don't remember the name, but probably flower wall ball or something. And I just wanted to kind of, I think it's important, and I didn't give this advice today, but if you're having a studio practice, or whatever you want to call it, a good way to, you have to go there every day or whatever, almost every day, hopefully every day. But if you're working on something, really extensive, or just kind of you're at a boring spot of it or frustrated, you won't go to the studio, and you got to keep it up. So I got some good advice from this artist, Nayland Blake, when I was really young at a residency, and he was like, what I do, and he has a very, vast variety of work, and he's like, I'll do one of the same thing, let's say I did this one, then what's the next one, so this is the same thing. One of the same thing, slightly different, one thing completely opposite of that, and then I'll make necklaces, a third thing that's not even considered art. And so you're always in the studio, and you're always making, and you're there, and you never know what's going to happen or how these things are going to kind of contaminate or pollinate each other. But it's important to kind of keep moving forward on the thing you're doing, but also have release valves so that you stay in the studio, but you don't have to be so professional. I don't know, you don't get all crazy, because it can get crazy. And so this one I just was well, I want to add some I want to accentuate how the form is being compressed and warped. And so I just it was easy. I just found I don't think I made this. I think just a graphic of a flower. And then I just bent a bunch of them, or I guess you would call it stretching, in Photoshop to different degrees. And then, so you can see this one's stretched, just to kind of just exaggerate the surface tension and where things are moving around. And so that, I made 4 more of these because that was exciting. It was a pain in the butt, but because these are just, this is wood, this is hydrocal, which is just fancy word for plaster, really, and then covered in enamel, and it's just rattle canned paint. I mean, the surfaces are pretty perfect. It takes a lot of sanding, but you don't need to go crazy with the tech stuff to get a nice clean surface. Here's another one that's tilted horizontal versus vertical, and glossy versus matte. Just different variations. I just said they were perfect. You can see that's not very good right there. This one went on the floor. I think that was it. You see, you kind of exhaust the possibilities of something. There's the ones that people tripped on these. Don't do that. Especially in a really narrow gallery space. That was unwise. This is a really bad slide. I thought it was better till I saw it the other day, and I included it anyway because it shows the work kind of. It's even hard to tell. This is the back office, and this is the front. There's a front desk of a gallery. So it's kind of a departure from the last series of work with the balls and the planks. But it also relates to the mannequin of the previous. These are really flat works. They're so it's photography where I photographed the inside of a press molded 2D mannequin. Well, first I would paint it in a neutral gray, and then photograph it, but I put these carbon fiber rods through and then put like fruit on them to photograph. Like you can see this is a real pepper. That's a real pear. That's clip art made into a sticker. And then I got like this fancy printer, and I would print on adhesive vinyl and then stick other things over. So it was kind of just like you are just kind of, you get a system and you're setting yourself up for, you get something like the first one was kind of an accident, and I was like, oh, I like this. Like, this has some legs. I can go somewhere with this. And then, you set yourself up and you work within that system, and because you've got something there and you're not quite sure, and that's totally okay. It's actually probably better if you don't know, and you go with it. You kind of have to have this blind faith, and it's good to get positive feedback that something's working and that you can keep going. So I did that for a while. There's one I install on a pole, and this is my friend just to show the scale. So it was like a little bigger than life size. So I did those for a bit. And similar to the ball on the wall, it kind of like tapered off as I was getting interested in other things. So like I think, with this, composition became a big factor, or almost like not a factor. I couldn't decide whether it was one or the other. And so I wanted to make work that was just, I wanted to make a wall work or a painting. It references painting because it's a square or it's a rectangle, but like, what's this just simplest, most abject way to like make a work? I was like, what can it be? And so I made a few of these. I forget the title. I don't think they need a title or it matters. It's just like a really thick aluminum foil, so very thin aluminum. They're big. They're like this wide, so it's like this industrial sheet. And then I would kind of mold them around these rectangles, stamp these kind of depressions in them with the same balls I was using for the plank, because all that stuff's like in the milieu of the studio. And then backfill them with like a high density foam, so that they're like they're solid. They look really lightweight and kind of like junky, kind of. Then they're so big, you're like, is this, it's like, it's not just like a sheet of foil. And then I painted, this is really thin enamel, like transparent enamel. You said ceramic artist. None of this has been ceramic yet. This isn't even ceramic. I do that now. And I did it in college before I switched to become a sculptor, or I shouldn't say that. It was always sculpture, but a sculpture major out of ceramics. But then I 20 years or 15 years later, got a wheel again, but didn't have the right hookup for a kiln in the studio, and that was going to cost this. And so I started using the wheel with clay to make these jacket molds, because I've always been interested in the vessel, and like almost. You realize when you're making sculpture, like almost everything's a vessel. But this way, with the limitation of not having, which you'll experience once you're gone from here, and all of a sudden you don't have all these awesome facilities, it's a real wake-up call, but don't let it discourage you, because, at the end of the day, you're artists, you're not fabricators. Like, you will end up with objects that you make, but it can be like, belly button lint. It doesn't need to be like a fiberglass Mickey Mouse. It doesn't need to be like a thing that is permanent. And you won't be able to do that anyway, so don't worry about it. I didn't have a kiln, so I improvised and came up with this thing where I would make a cylinder just like really quickly, like not worry about like a form. And then I'd put stuff in there, like through it, and then dump plaster in it and use it as kind of like a one-time mold, peel it off, and so you're seeing the inside of the cylinder with the spring kind of injected. And then, they were really thin. That was an issue. A lot of them broke. So I would like take a 2-part polyurethane and tint it and use that. This is the piece. It's about this big. This is a piece within the situation of a show. I think that was a poem. I don't remember. Not my poem. Here's another one, because you just end up just throwing all the shit you have in the studio in it. So this is like a dollar store lollipops, gumballs, confetti. This looked like, I tinted the urethane to be bubblegum pink. This, I just threw a wrench in there and threaded a rod, and that was kind of nice. As you can see, these are a lot rougher than the work before. And then I got a neighbor with a kiln. And and now it looks like I'm a ceramic artist again. But these are, this was from a memory, actually in undergrad, when we would make wheel work. And there was always these kids. It was like this. It was like around a campus, but they were always playing Frisbee golf, which is rad. I like Frisbee golf too. We were always worried about the Frisbees hitting our stuff, that it was drying. And so I was like, I'm making cylinders again. I might as well put some Frisbees in it. And there was just like a dollar store Frisbee with an emoji on it. So I started just like pressing these. And then I would paint them. This is enamel. This is just painted to look like it was like, that perfect, soft, flexible clay. So I did a few of these. This is an oddball piece. I decided to include it anyway. It was just, the show was like an ode to Duchamp, and the curator I had known for about a decade. It was this Italian guy, and I had made a zine with an image of this thing. I think it's called like a shovel or something. And I just randomly found it one day on the internet, and or I don't know where, it must have been. I don't know where else you find anything. But it was like 2 Duchamps meshed into one as a commercial product. And I was like, oh, talk about it ready-made. Like, that's like both of them. And I can buy it for $100. So I didn't even, for the show, I just like sent him the link. I was like, well, I'll be part of your Duchamp show. I got the perfect thing. He's like, I know. What was that thing you found? And so I just sent him the link, and then he bought it. And then I was like, I think you should just hang it from the ceiling. So that's, I don't know. I like it. But again, it's perfect. It's as ready-made gets, because I don't even feel any sort of authorship towards this. Which is another thing that's important to remember, is that authorship doesn't matter. Like, it's the first thing. It's really important. You're like building your identity right now. You're working, you sign your name on your artwork. But it's the first thing that goes away. So don't dwell on it at all. It doesn't matter at all, which can be hard to recognize. This is a part of an installation I did. This is an oil painting. This is an owl on a little, I was in Tokyo, and they have these like owl cafes, which in a contradiction, like, we supported by going there and drinking tea and watching all these little, and like playing, they're like taking photos of their on our shoulders. So it was an odd experience. And I took this photo. I didn't know it would become an artwork, and I'm not a painter, but my studio mate at the time was a really good oil painter, and it always looked fun, even though he was miserable all the time. But I was like, I could do that, I think. And but this photo, I rediscovered like maybe 6 months just looking through trip pictures, and I liked it because the the wallpaper, I didn't remember this, but the wallpaper of the Owl Cafe, it was these cartoon owls. So I like put those, it was just like, okay, this is an image that I want to paint. It was a good excuse to paint. The other works in the show was this, which I don't need to talk about, and then this was a sculpture that was kind of the end of making things out of cylinders, and it gets really kind of overworked and crazy. I mean, you can see a cylinder in there somewhere. It's kind of an exploded cylinder. There's like a fish tank, or like a like a ball. It's kind of one of the things I inserted into it, and it just kind of comes out. But it's pretty extreme in regards to like overdone. But I still think it's a good work. There's a close-up of the oil painting, or I guess a detail. I only put one of these in here because they're all kind of the same. It's similar to those pieces that I made by stamping the aluminum panels. I wanted to find some sort of just abject composition. So I dried these citrus fruits. This is vacuum formed plastic. They're about 21 inches. They're small. And I just like dried a bunch of citrus and just kind of threw these things on the board and just like kind of just printed these things out. And it's actually, I think there was maybe there's a picture of the show. No, I just kind of had like a long line of them on the wall. And I don't know, I hadn't thought about them for a while until I dug this up, but they're nice. The problem is now it's not archival, and all these are just like brown. You think they would stay the color forever when you see them. Like see them at the bar, like for like a fancy cocktail, but they all turn brown. Same thing, like more. This is like right now we're up to like 2019. Just a way, when I do wall work or flat work, I'm just trying to reduce composition down to its, people make monochromes. People just make rectangles. And I'm not quite that extreme, but like I wanted to make so these are just like the size of like those little signs you see that say like Forest Service or whatever. And, the gesture, how they're all shot up. And I found like these areas where you find these are kind of on the edge of where like, you're in the woods, but you're still driving. And you don't see them really shot up off the road. But so it's kind of this space that separates like social reality, like us here or driving roads. And then there's like natural reality, which is a totally legit space that we don't think about very much. And I had just kind of started moving back out west from the city and was really interested in not living my life inside of buildings, which I realized I had done my entire adult life. And so I was spending a lot of time out in the woods and just like, so these things kind of informed this body of work. And the little details of like really quickly wrapping the wire and stuff like that kind of sold them. These are pressed flowers. And then this work got a little more like it always does. I'm seeing a theme here now that they kind of just get worked through. And so this is like, a reference to the sign. Like you'll see it here. It's like the sign that's flipped up. It's like closed road or whatever. So then what happens when this is closed and then penetrated through and then flopped back open? So you have the space going in and out with different, the top is brass, the bottom is copper. And then they're almost alive. Like this does not look like that for very long because of oxidation. And the brass one was kind of the last one. I did a bunch in between. Well, I also did some enameled ones. Scott Malborn, who you guys know, and actually how I met Susan, did a thing down in Southern Oregon, and he was like, "Can you make those sign bullet hole things, but like for outdoors?" And so I said, "Sure." I really like Scott, and so I made about 20 of them along this trail up at Mount Ashland, and it was super fun. It was just like kind of I let loose. No longer was I just making these like whole works. I was having fun with different color and layering and stuff like that. There's a kind of in context of where it was. And I had a couple of the copper ones. This is aluminum and copper. You guys know what those are. This is a show at PNCA. There's a couple of brass pieces and my backpack full of morels, and there's another brass piece. And so to solve the archival problem, because I really liked those works, and I did some in the vacuum seal bags similar to the pressed flowers, but I knew those would last even shorter amount of time, and so I found a way to do a residency, which is probably the most important thing for you guys at this point, is apply for residencies, and they're hard to get into, but even more importantly, just figure out a way to make your life like an art residency. That's like the key to everything. Because the whole idea, and it's hard to make art in perpetuity. That's the goal. The goal isn't to like be a famous painter or whatever. The goal is to just be able to make your work. And so I did residencies when I was in college, and that really kind of put a self-confidence stamp on what I was doing. Because I was the youngest one there, and I shouldn't have really been there, but I got in, and then gave me confidence to apply for more residencies, and did one right when I moved to New York and met lifelong artist friends there from all over. So I've done a few residencies, and then this one is Heidi's place down in Yucca Valley Material Labs. Have you done that?
I just got in.
Congratulations, everybody. So Heidi worked at the school that's closed now in Portland, a really influential craft and art school. And she opened a multimedia kind of studio down in Yucca Valley near Joshua Tree. But this work was made there. They were focusing on glass casting. And so I got to figure out, how to take this temporary work of, I was doing a lot of work with the vacuum sealer. I'm not showing you because they're all kind of gone. But I was like, I can cast this in glass. That'll work. So apply for that residency. Now I'm doing ceramics again. Here's ceramics. This is ceramics. That's a heart with bubble wrap, like on this kind of cushion of bubble wrap. These are based on like a catalytic converter. There's like a candle. It's like a citronella candle inside a catalytic converter on a steel pole, but and then welded to it is this saw. So you can take the converter if you want. I was upset. I taught for a term at U of O, and one of the classes was an advanced sculpture class called Metal and the Everyday Object. It wasn't my syllabus. It was just kind of like a fill-in. So I had access to a metal studio, which I hadn't really had in a while. And I know how to weld, but not really. But I just wanted to make a catalytic converter cage for my car, because mine got stolen outside of Malia's house, actually, in Portland. So my first order of business was like, I got to protect this shit. It cost me like $400. But then that turned into like the work I made there was these catalytic converter cage-esque pieces. They got kind of weird. And this one worked. This is like propane. It works as like a lantern. This is a ceramic piece. This is kind of when I kind of started getting back into clay. This is a ceramic piece. This is raku. I don't know if you guys, it's kind of a fun thing. I did it in college and I haven't done it forever. It's a camping pillow that I made a pressed mold of. This is a stoneware version with some tent spikes holding it up. Another raku version with some tent spikes. This is a stoneware version of a whole mat. So I learned how to cast glass, and then it's not that hard. You would think it would be really technical, but they oversell it because they want to be like experts, and it's not that. So I was doing it, I was teaching at RCC down in Grants Pass, and I was the ceramics instructor. So I had just the Scut like 1227 kilns, and so I started casting little sculptures. But you know, at the end, I think the before it was glass was more successful. This you can't tell what it is. I mean, you can in person, but the slides are terrible. You know, I found like a baby. It was like a turkey chick that was dead next to the studio, and it was so new. There was no feathers, and it was like translucent. So I was like, oh, I can make that out of glass. I didn't really succeed, but it was fun anyway. But the original was better than the glass one. And then I was a friend, that painter friend I told you about that was always mad. He was doing a show. He's not always mad. That's a bad rap on him. But
We don't know.
it's a tough life to be a painter. I shouldn't say that. Never mind. If you're a painter, you know, though. I'm just saying that, you know. But he was doing a show, his first show in London at his gallery called Listen, and he was like, I want to do a sculpture of this. I have this idea when I was 21. Can you make it for me? You know, I'll pay. It's like I'll commission you to make this sculpture because I want the opening to be so cool. I want it this like stuffed big bear crying vodka, and we'll like drink out of it. And I was like, okay, like I do need the money. So he sent me a little model, and then so I like made kind of this, not quite this, really quickly, because it was this crazy deadline, and as you guys know, large ceramics takes a long time to dry. This is probably like, I don't know, about that tall, and it's thick because of that, and it's got mechanics, you know, it's got pumps, and it comes out of the eyes, and heat. And then like a week later, I was like, well, I'll make you two because one's definitely going to break. He's like, cool, thanks. And then he's busy making paintings. And then a week later, he's like, you know what? It's not going to be a bear. I'm like, I knew you would do this. It's going to be a figure because I've realized all the paintings are figures. It's going to be a figure. Blah, blah, blah. The point of this story is now I had this thing, and I was like, well, dude, to be honest, I kind of need the bear. Oh, I explained to him the origins of the teddy bear. He didn't know the story, the Teddy Roosevelt story, blah, blah, blah. And I had already said yes to Scott about doing another version of this thing. And so I was like, can I use your bear for... And he was like, yeah, you're going to change it, right? And I was like, yeah, don't worry. And I changed it, and I put a collar on it, and whatever. This is the boy... So he changed it even worse. He's like, I wanted a boy crying tequila. So I made him this sculpture. But it was good. It was a challenge. It was the first full figure I made, like, out of clay. It's life size. There you can see it crying tequila. And they had, like, a party. There's someone that worked at the gallery, just for reference, sitting next to the documentation. I was like, you should definitely have it have a crock. So I sent the crock, but he didn't go for it. There it is in the kiln. This is our little kiln in Baker. There's the bear, which I just left the same. It was supposed to be realistic, but I was like, this is good enough. And then, I have him crying into a pan of gold. And it's just a fountain now. It's not like, you don't want to drink out of that. So it turned from like a crying bear to kind of, these are like hydraulic, like the eyeballs are like, you can see the brass. And you can see it's just a little, the poor people had to fill up the tank all the time. And in the tank were two skulls. That piece was, the title was the proposal for, remember when that Teddy Roosevelt statue got taken down outside of the Met? Or no, the Museum of Natural History? He's on a horse. He's got a slave and an Indian or Native American guides, and he's like that. And they it was 2020. They took it down, and so this title was like a proposal for the new statue, and that's Teddy. I sent it to them. They didn't get back to me. And then there was two skulls in the bottom of the tank, and then I was done. I deinstalled this and had these skulls, and I didn't really know what to do with them. So I used one and made a new work that, this is ballistics gel. And so the skull was like encased. So I used the cooler as a mold. So I put the skull, it was more complicated, but essentially I put the skull upside down in the cooler, had it held there, and then filled it full of way more ballistics gel than you would think. And then the pedestal is the cooler. It's pretty eerie. I'm not usually like that, but and then so, I made this figure for my friend Van, and I never really got to work on the face because you saw him like crying. And I really was like, man, I really wanted to make that face look good. I need to make a bust so I can just like make a face and not have to be like working upside down. And so my own prompt to myself was, make a face or make a bust. Okay, well, that's weird. It's weird to have any sort of cropped figure. Like, what is a bust? Where did it come from? And you research, like, oh, Alexander the Great was the first bust in the Western canon. Then it's like, no, maybe not. Maybe it was Nefertiti. And so I decided to do like a Nefertiti Alexander sculpture. So this is it, like in greenware. And then I needed to make it a fountain because remember I was into fountains at the time. But then I was like, no, I want to make it a kegerator. So I'll show you. So this was originally, it was going to be like a fountain. And it had this ceramic thing. And it was actually a collected rainwater and then go through her and come out in a recycled thing. And that rainwater was, I forget the term, but it's like a fancy way to rehydrate water. I can't remember what it was called. But, and then someone dropped something on this and it broke. And I was like, thank God, because that wasn't the direction I wanted to go. I wanted it to be a kegerator. So it works. This is the final version. I got rid of the thing on top because I don't need that anymore. And it actually works as a recycled. This keg I polished and then cut a hole in the back for the tubing. So it's just kind of like a fountain as a kegerator. But if you wanted to, you could. It would work as a kegerator. You see my awesome photo display with my lawn right there. Anyway, and so I did the bust, and then I was like, okay, what's next? I want to do a full figure. It's my own full figure. And so, this was for my New York friends, I'll say. And then I wanted to do something that, like, for Baker. Or, this place that now is my home. I've been there 3 or 4 years. I'm starting to get to know the community. And so, one of the people that comes to the studio is a baker. She is not Mennonite, but I noticed the Mennonite community. Like, you'd see them in Albertsons, and so I started learning about them and asking about them. And so I was like, oh, I'll use my friend as a model, and I'll make a Mennonite baker. And that's like, I'll just do that, and then something will happen along the way. It'll change. It didn't really change, but it's not fired yet. That's why I'm showing you these green pictures. It's drying still. But this is like a mock-up. You guys see this picture. This is in the flyer. She's on break. She's sitting on a 5-gallon bucket. She's got Crocs because it's my decision. And she's just like having a coffee. She's going to have an apron that actually goes down more like a dress. The apron's going to be, I'm going to make the apron, it's going to be a lot longer. And she's sitting on a stack of 5-gallon buckets, like just kind of looking off. But I don't know if it's going to survive. We'll see. Sometimes they don't. This is called John. It's again, like a prompt I made for myself was like, what's the origin of the idiom of bring his head on a plate? So, I guess I went to church a little bit as a kid, but I didn't know it was John the Baptist and this whole thing. And so there's another way to make a bust that's not. I'm like, okay, a bust is like a dude's head, or like a head. It's hard to make a part of a person without it looking like violent. Like, you're just like, oh, here's an arm. You're like, cool, dude, you have alginate, you made an arm, but it looks like someone's arm got blown off. Like, it's hard to escape that. A few sculptors can do that. And so I was like, okay, let's lean into this decapitated thing. And so that's John. And then I wanted to turn it into kind of like a kegerator. So I made it's a red light, what's that shit people get into to get cold? It's a red light cold plunge John the Baptist fountain. Obviously, that's what it is. Yeah, that's that one. That's it during the day. His eyes are a little, he just got decapitated, so he's still grinning. If you read the story, it's grim, but I don't think he was sad. I mean, you read the story. This is the newest work I'm working on, and this is the end of my slideshow. This is the work coming out of the kiln. This is a donkey that's caught in a barbed wire fence. And I'm going to do a lot of cold work to this. I'm just figuring out the tail now. The tail can't be ceramic. It's going to be way more compositional. And it's that, you know the term, so you can see inside the cow. What's that called? Don't you know that? Yeah, the stomach window. There's a term for it. It's actually functions so you can lift it. It's super heavy. But there's going to be like a plant. I don't know yet. It's not finished. But that's the last. His teeth are porcelain. But that's the thing I'm working on now. Alongside, you can see I'm going back and forth between like these cartoon. I'm doing a kind of a series or whatever, like 4 or 5 plush animal sculptures, and then I'm going to do a few like figure sculptures. And that's going to keep me busy for a while. These things, it takes about a year from start to finish when you include dry time and stuff like that. And so that's what I'm working on now, and that's kind of what I've been working on since I was in college. That's it. So now we do questions, right?
Yeah, we have a little time left.
Oh, sorry. I knew I would talk too much.
Do you work in the like repurposed school in Baker?
No.